It's now time to start fixing components to the painted parts of your clock. In addition to your kit parts and some super glue, you'll need a small flat-bladed screwdriver, one of the vinyl gloves, a pair of pliers and some wire cutters. You'll need to find the painted gem panel and the 12mm diameter red plastic gem. Place the gem within the ring and, holding it in place, turn over the panel and drip a couple of drops of superglue in the hole so it flows into the joint between the panel and the gem. Whilst the glue dries, sit it on the edge of a table to prevent the risk of the glue sticking it to the surface. To assemble the AM/PM display arm, you'll need to find the AM/PM engraving, the painted no paint counterweight, the small 3D printed cam follower, and a 5mm long M3 cheesehead screw. Sit the counterweight on a flat surface, the no paint text facing upwards. Practice lining up the AM/PM engraving over the counterweight so the holes are centred and the rest of the counterweight is hidden by the engraving. I'm holding the parts up for clarity. It's probably easier to leave the counterweight sitting on the table. Notice the hole in the engraving is slightly larger to make it easier to line up. When you feel confident, run a little superglue over the no paint text, keeping it away from the hole. Then lower the engraving into place, keeping the hole centred. Hold the parts together for about 20 seconds to allow the glue to set. Now place the 5mm long M3 screw through the hole in the engraving and screw it into the threaded hole in the 3D printed cam follower. It might be tight, so gripping the follower with a pair of pliers can help. Tighten the screw until the follower won't rotate. The cam follower arm needs several parts attaching. You'll need 6 parts: the painted follower arm, the painted ratchet pawl, a 5mm long M3 cheesehead screw, an 8mm long M3 cheesehead screw, an M3 brass nut, the small bearing, and the metallic card jig. Carefully bend up and snap off 4 of the small card spacers from the metallic card jig. The remaining one is spare. Push the 8mm long screw through the hole in the end of the arm from the back. Now place 2 of the card spacers onto the screw. You can often pick up the card spacers just by pushing your finger against them. Now put on the small bearing, another 2 card spacers, and finally the brass nut. Tighten the nut gently to hold everything in place. The bearing should turn freely because of the 4 card spacers. Now place the 5mm long screw through the hole in the middle of the arm from the front. Tighten it gently into the threaded hole in the painted side of the ratchet pawl. Now loosen the screw by about half a turn so the pawl swings freely. To assemble the seconds engraved panel, you'll need 8 parts. These are the painted seconds engraved panel, the engraved seconds dial, the lens in its bag, don't remove it yet, the red spirit level, a 12mm long M3 countersunk screw, an M3 brass washer, an M3 brass nut, and the grooved bearing. Position the engraved seconds dial into the rebate on the left of the panel, ensuring the longer seconds engraving faces upwards. Holding the dial in place, turn over the panel and drip several drops of superglue around the join between the dial and the panel. The glue will be drawn into the joint. Hold it in place until the glue has set. Wipe off any excess glue with some tissue. Now push the red spirit level into its slot so it sits halfway between the front and back of the panel. From the back, place a drop of superglue on the 4 horizontal flat sides to hold it in place. Blot off any excess glue with a tissue. In preparation for fixing in the lens, sit the seconds panel upside down on the edge of a table so the lens hole sticks out over the edge. As superglue sets, the chemical released reacts with the smallest amount of skin oil to produce white fingerprint impressions. Useful if you want to find latent fingerprints, not so helpful if a lens ends up displaying your fingerprint. To prevent this, wear a vinyl glove when opening and handling the lens. Remove the lens from its bag and rest it into the panel from the back. Once you are happy it is properly seated, aim the tube of superglue away from the lens and carefully squeeze it until a single drop appears on the nozzle. This avoids the risk of superglue sputtering out of the nozzle as air bubbles are released. To avoid the risk of dripping glue onto the lens, avoid moving the glue over it. Carefully line the drop up with one of the notches around the lens and touch it onto the notch. The drop will immediately be sucked into the notch by capillary action. Repeat the process for the other 2 notches and leave the glue to set. Any excess glue can be removed with a tissue, but always wiping away from the lens. If you do end up with a drop of superglue on the lens, just leave it to set as it won't be too noticeable. Trying to wipe it off will just leave a very visible smear. Now it's time to fix on the grooved bearing. Push the 12mm long countersunk screw through the panel from the back so it sits level with the surface. Place the brass washer onto the screw, followed by the grooved bearing. Finally, gently tighten on the nut so it holds the bearing in place. And your fabulous seconds panel should look like this. To fix the chain and counterweight onto the hour hand spindle, you'll need the painted hour hand spindle, the length of chain, the brass counterweight, and the short piece of silver wire. Holding the spindle horizontally, rotate it so that the small offset hole is facing upwards. The hole extends into the spindle where it opens onto the inside of the shaft hole. This is where you will drip the glue to fix the chain in place. Gently lower the chain into the hole until you can see it has passed the open section inside the shaft hole. Hold the chain in place as it will otherwise be pulled out of the hole. Now drip a couple of drops of superglue into the open section from inside the shaft hole. Wait until the glue sets, probably about a minute, as the glued area will be quite large. Once the glue has set, drop the free end of the chain through the hole in the top of the brass weight. With everything resting on a flat surface, pull some chain through the weight and push the short length of silver wire through one of the last chain links. The silver wire will prevent the chain from pulling out of the weight. To hold the silver wire in place, use a pair of pliers to fold the wire over itself to form a circle. Check the silver wire can't slip through the brass counterweight. Trim off the ends of the wire so they can't be seen sticking out, and the weight should hang freely from the chain. Congratulations! You've assembled some more beautiful parts for your clock.